Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now I know it's a bit crazy that I'm releasing another Should You Pull video quite so soon, before even the last event has even happened, but we're getting shotgunned with events over these next couple of weeks. We've got Balthier coming tomorrow, as of the release of this video of course, and then we've got Caius coming along on Tuesday for the beginning of February, being the first banner we get in February. And he's got an interesting kit that I think gets looked over by a lot of people, but there are some points to his kit that may make you consider spending some resources on him. So if that's all stuff that you guys are interested in, then of course for all details on Caius and his event, then stay tuned and keep on watching. As with all of my videos, please don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. Twitch, normally I would stream Final Fantasy XIV on a Sunday morning, but because Balthier has decided to throw a bit of a spanner in the works and come out on a Sunday, I'm actually going to be instead streaming Balthier's event and the Abyss that comes along with him, and of course I'll be streaming Caius' event and every other event that comes out when it comes to Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. I do also want to turn you guys' attention to a charity stream that I'm going to be doing on the 23rd of February. There is going to be a marathon stream for 19 hours against COVID-19, helping the British Red Cross in aiding people who have been affected by the COVID pandemic, including people who've had physical symptoms, obviously, job loss, mental health, all sorts of things. We're going to try and raise as much money as we can for the British Red Cross, so definitely check out the link in the description box below towards my fundraiser for that. On Patreon, obviously I shout out one of my patrons every time I release one of my videos, and today that person is going to be Kyle, who is a recent member of my Patreon, so thank you very much for your support, and everybody else who has joined in on my Patreon as well. And if you'd like a title card, like benefits such as voice chats and being a part of Would You Pull and stuff like that, then perhaps consider becoming a patron yourself. Don't forget to check out all of the links around me for Dissidia Opera Omnia resources. They're all linked in the description box below. And of course, don't forget to check out all the other content creators as well that are listed below, as well as me. So first things first, we're going to talk about Caius and what his LD brings and what Caius is actually all about. But before we do so, let's have a look at the banner itself. It's going to contain Caius, his EX, his LD, his full kit. It's also going to contain Ramses' burst again, so it's an opportunity for you to grab that if you haven't already, but only his burst. And then it's also going to have Lise and Noel with their EX kits along for the ride as well. Now, Caius is actually more simple than he first appears when it comes to looking at his kit over here, because a lot of his stuff revolves around his Heart of Chaos and Body of Soul buffs. Now, Body and Soul is a buff that levels up as he uses his skills and his HP pluses, etc. And it gives him sort of Brave and HP regen, and when it's at max stacks, it makes the plus versions of his abilities. So when I talk about his abilities, you can assume that you're always going to be using the plus versions because you're going to have Body and Soul and Heart of Chaos' buffs at all times. Now, Heart of Chaos, which is a floating special effect that he has at all times, raises his like offensive stats and everything, and he gets little buffs and bits and pieces from that, but it's not the primary function of it, because those buffs persist even if he doesn't have Heart of Chaos. What Heart of Chaos does is it prevents a fatal attack on Caius and restores his HP to max and dispels the Heart of Chaos for that reason, so he's not immortal, but he still gets all of the buffs from it. Now, Pulsar Burst is pretty much just a Brave HP attack with 8 hits on its plus version after you've awakened it and everything, and it also grants him a stack of his Body and Soul buff. But you'll find that a lot, if not all of his kit, does that so that he's constantly at 5 stacks of Body and Soul, so you're constantly getting the plus versions of its attacks. It's a single target, 8 hit Brave HP, it's quite a lot of hits for this point in time. He also gets to restore his Guardian buff, which is again max Brave and attack stats, so he can keep on top of that, and it's all good stuff. It's not the primary function for Caius though. Caius' primary function is a framed debuffer. So similar to like a Miditelian and Kefka, but instead of having like the HP silence that Kefka has or the turn deletion that a Miditelian has, Caius has Doom. Now Doom basically is exactly what you would think it is if you've played any Final Fantasy game. It's a debuff that ticks down, and when it expires, it instantly breaks the target. So Eye of Bahamut targets all enemies after you put everything into it and gives them 50% max Brave down, 50% defense down, poison, and Doom. And it continues to level up his Body and Soul buff as well. But you're with a 6-hit Brave HP attack with 50% splash damage when all is said and done. And all of these debuffs are added to all enemies affected, as it would be with any single target move that evolves into an AoE attack. This is fine. Like, it's really, like, the debuffs aren't weak. Like, 50% on the defense down and max bravery is pretty good. The Doom is nice, but the problem with Caius is basically the same problem that you would have with Kefka or a Mid-Italian. Because all of these debuffs are framed, it becomes quite awkward to then try and install other debuffs, like, because there's a lot of characters nowadays, a big example being a character like Noctis, who relies on a debuff like the Warp Strike in order to be able to use themselves to their full potential. So you have to be very careful how you use a character like Caius so that you're not overloading on, you know, on debuffs, so that you end up pushing everything off and then Caius is the only one that's getting anything in. And honestly, Doom is fine, but at this point in time when we've got characters like Ramza who can shout and instantly break a character anyway, it's quite difficult to time the perfect timing for Doom for it to go off when you want it to, as opposed to, say, Kefka, who just inflicts Trine and the HP silence, then you just don't have to worry about what they're doing. So, but in that regard, Caius is, like, slightly weaker than his contemporaries, but he does have other things to offer that are very strong instead. So, with his EX attack, Inferno, it's a Brave HP attack with multiple HP dumps when you put all your ingots and everything into it. That inflicts a guaranteed launch, it batteries the party, it also delays the enemy, it's got a lot of stuff going for it. It's very similar, actually, to Ramza's LD attack, but without the buffs. So what you're getting instead is, and when you've got Body and Soul at 5 levels, you get Inferno Plus, which is a strictly stronger version of it. You also get another framed buff on Caius, which is Chronic Shackles, which gives him more initial bravery so that he's able to then restore more of it through his Body and Soul buff. And it also extends the amount of time his buffs last for, so that you're able to keep up with having Body and Soul all the time, more or less. But the problem with his EX attack is the slow recast rate. It's not ideal for him. The slow recast rate, if it was a little bit quicker, then Caius would be a magnificent character to take along just because he can do so much all at once. But everything is just like a little bit off when it comes to Caius. Like, the framed debuff that you're taking him for over characters like Kefka isn't as good as the character you're taking for with characters like Kefka, but his hit count is higher, generally speaking. Inferno Plus being a 4-hit double HP dump, obviously twice, it is strong, and because you're batterying and launching, he does a lot of different things all at once, but he is very much kind of the jack of all trades, master of none at this point. Now, his LD is very interesting. So Giga Graviton is, it is a massive Brave HP attack. It does an HP attack, then it does another 6-hit AoE Brave HP attack after it as well, so you've got multiple HP dumps in that. It's split HP damage. It gives him his Body and Soul buff straight away. If your enemy already has Doom on them, which they will do, then it gives you break like no matter what. So it's similar to like Arden, where they break whether they're unbroken, whether they've got the bravery, it doesn't matter. They're always going to have that. And then it also gives you a free skill on the following turn, and it also augments his Heart of Chaos buff by making it so that he gets, so that he's got a little bit more stats from that as well. And then the main thing, however, when it comes to his LD, is that he comes into battle and all targets have the debuffs you would have gotten from Eye of Bahamut. And this is actually very, very relevant in more ways than you might think. The main reason that people take Caius along is because of his LD call ability. Now, his LD call ability is Giga Graviton, so it's going to do the Brave Gain HP damage, then it's going to do the Brave HP damage afterwards, and you get all of that stuff, but it's not listed on here, but you actually get all of the Eye of Bahamut debuffs as well, because Caius has come into play to inflict all those debuffs, and then he leaves. So, because you are getting that, you get the instant break from the fact that they have Doom Chaos on them. Because they have Doom on them, it's going to instant break them again. It all does add up very nicely. And honestly, like, because of that, I think that Caius is quite undervalued. Not just necessarily because he is quite a good character to take along for fights in general. He does have all those frame debuffs. Having that many frame debuffs means it's very hard for a character to put buffs on them. He plays well with certain other characters, particularly Balthier, who can remove any frame buffs that are in the way of Caius being able to put Doom back on them. He does a decent amount of damage. The EX, while it has a slow recast, isn't fantastic for that, but it does do a lot of damage when it does go off, and it does do a lot of different things all at once. And the LD does extend his longevity by giving him free skill uses. He's got 4 uses of it. It is a good attack, but that LD call ability, to have that as well as the Eye of Bahamut call to be able to inflict the debuffs as again, it is useful to have. 2 lots of Doom as well as the instant break on the LD call itself is reason enough for people to at least consider him on its own. Lastly, the LD boards actually make it so that Giga Graviton does 3 HP attacks. So it does the Brave Gain, HP attack, and then HP attack, and then HP attack again. So like I said earlier, it does actually hit really quite hard, considering that you get 4 uses of it and you're gaining... this is what I mean about a character that benefits greatly from Balthier or any character that has Brave and HP damage up, because the only way you're going to get extra damage on a follow-up attack or any HP attack that you didn't control how much bravery you had beforehand is to increase the bravery and HP damage you're dealing during that attack. So Giga Graviton itself is going to benefit from that massively. We've already gone over the LD call ability and why it's as good as it is. But with regards to his high armor, I would personally leave this one. It's attack keyword, it's good, it's fine, but I think that Caius himself, the reason you're bringing Caius is for that LD, for if you wanted to take him as a damage dealer, then you could consider this, because having that HP and bravery damage cap lifted slightly is going to make his LD deal that much more damage. But I think the majority of people are going to be pulling for him to have access to that LD call. And then with regards to his artifacts, he has a C50 that you definitely want in on, because he's got bravery gen through his body and soul buff, so it increases initial bravery in his attack. And then you just want attack to make sure that he's nice and rounded for whatever fight you decide to bring him to. So now let's quickly go over the Lost Chapter itself and the Luthenia mission that's going to come around it. Now, if you remember the Caius' event the first time it came around, you'll remember the metal drum enemies, which are a variant on one of the FF8 bosses. And these guys have high resistance to a lot of different things, so basically you want to be taking physical damage dealers for this particular fight, unless of course you're bringing along some sort of enchant in peril, because that can also work. They also are immune to poison and sap, and the reason that that's relevant is because the key to the orb is to inflict 4 debuffs in a single turn, similarly to how Ramza's event was inflicting multiple buffs in a single turn. Now you can split this, there are 2 enemies here, so you can split this by having 2 debuffs inflicted on both of them at the same time, and that will still count for the orb as well. Now there's loads of characters that you can bring along for this. Obviously Caius is going to be the main one, but you could bring Kefka, you could bring a Mid-Italian, you could bring Dark Knight Cecil, his LD will do it, and he's actually useful in a different regard as well. X-Death will do it. Even characters without LDs like Oren and Gabranth can be used here, and you can use them and take advantage of the fact that physical is the only thing you can deal with. So if you've been wanting to pull out Oren or Gabranth and you haven't been able to for a long time, then you could give that a shot. Alternatively, you could add spheres to a character that can only inflict 1 debuff, so that you can actually take advantage of it that way as well. Shantotto is also another really good option because of her ability to inflict all elemental resist down, bypassing obviously the increase in resistance to magic and range. They also have a blue aura that they put up that functions very similarly to how Diablos' Dark Aura came up during Ramza's event. And in order to get rid of this and stop them from insta-killing one of your characters when they next get their turn, you have to deal 100,000 damage or more in a launch. So obviously, again, Caius is going to be useful for this because not only does he have the debuffs to counter the orb, he also has launch on demand through his EX. But Dark Knight Cecil does this very, very well as well. Ramza obviously does this very well as well. They both have launches on demand. If you just want a high-end damage dealer to complement your method of countering the orb and your support line, then Cloud can obviously do it as well. There's honestly quite a lot of different ways that you can get around this particular mission, as long as you have characters that can do debuffs and launch. That's all this particular event really wants from you. They're not This isn't the scariest Lufenia. In all of my research, a lot of people reported that this was one of the easier Lufenia missions around, but obviously it's still quite stringent on who you take along with it, because there's quite so many characters that can do the orb requirement and inflict those debuffs, then this is definitely one of the nicer ones we've had in a while. So now, of course, we ask the big question, should you be pulling for Caius? Honestly, I think Caius is a nice character to have, primarily on the back of an LD call that is actually useful. However, I don't think that undervalues him. By saying that the primary reason to pull for Caius is his LD call, that doesn't make him any less valuable. Honestly, characters like Caius and Jack in the future having such powerful LD calls actually makes their value higher in some regards than some characters that you would bring along in your main party, because it's something you know you're going to use a lot. So if you're wanting to take advantage of that LD call, and honestly, you get a competent debuffer and damage dealer along with it. He's certainly not bad. He's got a lot going for him. He just doesn't have as much within each of his kind of roles as other characters that are more specialized in those roles do, but he's definitely competent. He's just a little bit on the slow side, but that LD call is really powerful. Also, I mean, this could be taken as a hot take, but honestly, because if you care about the LD call and don't particularly care about Caius, because everything is tied into his LD, including the enter play debuffs on entry, you could actually argue for the idea of pulling for the LD and then not pulling for the rest of his kit. Obviously, you would want to complete the kit. It makes sense, you would want to have a complete character rather than an incomplete one. But if you happen to get the LD in a free pull, then you could still consider skipping this and getting a character that's worthwhile just because of that one ability off the bat. And also, if you don't have characters that are more sort of geared for frames debuffs like Kefka or a Minitelian, characters like that, or you wanted a physical alternative to them because a lot of the major debuffers are magic based, then Caius may well be the one for you. But there are a lot of options out there when it comes to debuffers, and Doom is nice, but it's not as immediate and helpful off the bat as, say, HP Silence or deleting turns, etc., things like that. Doom is just one of those things that's quite nice, and you actually get Doom off of his LD call, and you get instant break off of various call abilities as well, including his own, of course. And so therefore there might be a reason then not to pull for Caius. And honestly, if you're wanting to recover from resources after you've pulled for Ramza or maybe Balthier, and there's a lot of nice characters that are coming out in the latter half of this month, like Jack with an arguably even better LD call than Caius. Penello's very strong, Cryle's very strong. Hope, which should be coming at the end of this month as well, he's very strong. There's a lot of really potent banners, so having having a time in which you can save is a good thing. So now it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to have your voice heard and let everybody know whether you would or wouldn't pull on a banner and why. Now the response to Caius is tepid at best. A lot of people are not hugely excited about him. There are some that are, but it seems like more people are willing to throw tickets at this and kind of be okay with not getting it than not. So to go into the numbers, 54% of players have said yes, they're going to use tickets on this banner. 37% said that they weren't going to pull on this banner at all, and then just 10% of players said that they would use gems to pull for Caius. So Jagged King first of all says 100% pulling for him, love him in 13 and like how he plays in Dissidia, plus I can try for Ramza Burst while I chase the LD. Now the reason I brought this particular comment up is because I think that this is probably the better of the two banners that follow Balthier to pick up Ramza's Burst if you haven't already. Guy's nice, but if you already have Gao, then you have no need for Guy really. But he's got his own benefits, and obviously we'll come to that when Guy comes around and we do the Should You Pull video for him. But I do think that if you're chasing Ramza's Burst, then throwing a few tickets at this couldn't hurt. Spickle says, I'll be using tickets for Caius. I've enjoyed using him since its initial release, so I'm looking forward to his rework. What's more, that LD does make for a very nice and clutch call ability. While the call ability, I believe, is the primary reason to pull for Caius, that's not to say that he's bad, because he isn't. He does have a lot of sort of unique applications. He's got very high hit counts on his attacks. He's just a little on the slow side, and Doom isn't as strong as some of the other debuffs on debuff heavy characters. Light Husky says, personally I'll be going hard on tickets for him as he's a personal love of mine. His LD solidifies his kit now more than ever. His frame debuffs are great in regards to preventing enemies from actually buffing themselves. And this is true. There's a lot of enemies that put multiple buffs on themselves, and if they're clogged up, with framed debuffs, then it makes them a lot harder to do that. Similarly, like I said, you can pair Caius up with Balthier and it actually worked pretty well because you get the extra bonuses on multiple HP dumps for Caius, as well as removing any framed buffs that are in the way so that you can apply your framed debuffs and then them not be able to buff them again. And then lastly, Sad Panda says Caius is a skip for me. I would need to pull for his full kit, and with all the great characters still coming up, a great call ability just isn't enough to put him over the edge for me. And that's also fair enough. Like, call abilities, while I think that they're worth pulling for, and there are quite a lot of people that do, they're not as exciting as getting a full-fledged character that you're going to use a lot and stuff like that. So I can understand why there are going to be a lot of people that are skipping out on this banner. But I think the main reason that people are skipping out on this banner is because, well, at the end of the day, you can't pull on everybody, not really. So therefore, you kind of have to pick and choose where you're going to skip. And I think Caius just kind of falls on the wrong side of the tracks in that regard. So that's going to be all for my video on Caius and whether you should or shouldn't pull for him. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell for notifications, and of course check all of my social media down below as I stated earlier. Big thank you to all of my patrons for casting their votes and their comments with regards to Caius. And it's nice to get opinions other than mine on the video so that you guys can see what other people are saying as well as just myself. And then that's pretty much it from me. So thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.